Trevor Sikkema joins me now. Pro Football Focus, Trev. I don't know what exactly you are doing over there, only to say that you're doing a lot.
It's very true. It's very true. No, they got me doing everything, man. Hosting live shows, writing feature articles, writing draft content, hosting podcasts. But this is what we live to do, man. So I'm very glad to do it all. But it does make podcast intros particularly difficult for hosts of shows that I go on. So I do feel bad for you in that regard.
Well, hopefully I'm handling it well so far. we're what, 30 seconds in. I haven't crashed and burned yet. But I do want to say, I don't think you get enough credit. Your Twitter handle is at Tampa Bay Trey. Really, I think the fraud Tom Brady is stealing credit from you for trying to name brand the city. Nobody out here knows that you were doing it first. I mean, do you harbor any ill will towards Tom Brady for that?
He brought the city a championship, so no, I shut my mouth, honestly. But it is funny because obviously that is my Twitter handle, and I no longer live in Tampa anymore. I used to cover the Buccaneers for Pewter Report, so I did that full time for 3 or 4 seasons. Then I moved from Tampa, which is I'm from just south of Tampa. That's where I grew up. And the month after I moved, they signed Tom Brady, and obviously that means the year after I left, they won a championship. So it's funny. Everybody talked about me as the curse and I can never come back to Tampa, but we're keeping the Twitter handle. We're keeping it. I'm not giving that up.
As you should. And, I started working for the Falcons the summer of 2017. So you could say maybe it's a blessing that I didn't have to experience the Super Bowl there, but it would have been nice to have been part of that ride, certainly. But we're not here to talk about the past, about past Super Bowls. We're here to talk about hopefully the future and getting on the right track towards making it back to the big game. And the draft seems like, on the one hand, obviously the best way for the Falcons to do that, given their financial limitations. And on the other, it seems like nobody has any clue how the Falcons should approach this draft. Hopefully they do. But you recently wrote an article, kind of 6 trades for, was it 6 or 8 trades? I'm looking at the number 8 because they're 6. Thank you. 6 trades basically that you would like to see in the first round of this draft. And the Falcons, you kick things off with the Falcons, obviously. They're at number 8. Can you explain a little bit why you think it would behoove Atlanta to trade back from a top 10 draft spot?
Yeah, I just think they're in a really good spot, which could be a sweet spot for, I think it all centers around the fact of, if Atlanta's not in on one of these quarterbacks, then I think the best move for them is to trade back. And the way that I put it in the article is they've already got 2 extra second-round picks, or they've got 2 second-round picks and they have 2 third-round picks. So they don't need more capital in this year's draft. But them moving on from Matt Ryan means that this is now a multi-year thing. The Falcons roster is bad. It's very bad. It's very devoid of talent, which means that you are going to need multiple drafts in a row to really string together to get the roster where it needs to compete. And when I look at number 8, if they want a quarterback, take the quarterback. Fine. What, Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, I can't talk teams out of a quarterback. Like they clearly need one. And if they think their franchise guy is going to be available at number 8, take it. I would advise against it, but if that's ever on the table, you're never not going to move back. So if they want a quarterback, take one at 8. If they don't, I think a lot of people look at a lot of other needs that they might have. Potentially offensive tackle, potentially a big-time pass rusher, basically any position on the defense, actually, now that I bring it up. And, of course, wide receiver is also the massive one. You're not going to fix that with one pick. Now, if they trade back, there are a couple of trade targets I see. 17 to the Chargers. The Chargers could get very aggressive if we saw a lot of the moves that they made earlier this offseason. If I'm the Chargers, why not get even more aggressive, pop up into the top 10, get somebody that you really want, a pass rusher, a Jordan Davis type, an offensive tackle if one of them's still available on the board, whatever it is. Go get aggressive and go make that roster as complete as possible because you're already all in that regards. The Pittsburgh Steelers sitting at number 20. Maybe they want to lure up, maybe they want to go up for a quarterback. What Atlanta should be doing, since they already have 2 second-round picks, 2 third-round picks this year, don't invest in getting capital back from this year. Move back to one of those spots. Get yourself a good pass rusher if one's still available, or one of the wide receivers, which I think could very well be available at 17,
Mm-hmm.
at number 20, somebody that's going to be able to help you. I think you can get a good wide receiver at that spot and get a first round pick and another day 2 pick next year. Make it happen. Make this trade back something where you go, okay, I'm going to trade back from 8 to 17 or 20. I got a bad roster on my hands, and I'll still have a first round pick, 2 second round picks, 2 third round picks this year. And then next year I'll have 2 first round picks, 2 second round picks. That's how you do it. And that's why, obviously it's a lot easier said than done. You got to find 2 to tango. You got to find the right price.
Right.
But that's why I said in the article, to me, it would make a lot of sense if Atlanta traded back. I wrote quite a bit last year talking about how the Falcons should have traded back from 4. I love Kyle Pitts. I graduated from the University of Florida. Kyle Pitts is my boy. I am the biggest Kyle Pitts fan in the world, and I think he's going to be phenomenal in the NFL. But
Right.
I was told that the whole reason why they're not going to trade back from 4 without drafting a quarterback is because they want to put the best offense around Matt Ryan that they possibly can. Well, fast forward not even a year, Matt Ryan's not even on the team. Okay, I know they couldn't have exactly foreseen exactly what happened with Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage and all of that, but
Right. Yeah.
you realize how fragile things are. And so, they could have traded back from number 4 last year and got themselves another really good player, had multiple first round picks this year, and they didn't do that. So this is kind of my plea to maybe do that this year. It's a little bit more obvious that they need more help. They need more premium picks. And so that's honestly what went into me writing that part for the Falcons.
And it makes a lot of sense. And here in Atlanta for years, people have been that's been a primary option, I think, in a lot of fans' minds because of the lack of free agency flexibility. They like the notion of, okay, well, let's get more draft picks then to work with. Let's get more of an influx of young players on this roster, what have you. The Falcons, largely have not done that for much of the past decade. But I think there could be an argument to be made where, why do you necessarily want more maybe above average players as opposed to 1 or 2 really, really good elite players? But it sounds like what you're saying is, depending on maybe the position that they're targeting in the first round, receiver, we talked about this on your podcast, NFL Stock Exchange. It's a little bit of a pick your poison type of wide receiver group, but that their talent levels or their upside may kind of be in that same range. So maybe that's a position where they say, the person we're getting at 8 may not be very different from the person we're getting at 17 or 20. It may just be a different type of player. And so you're saying that, going that option while then also investing in building up the other parts of your roster with above average players who are better than the players you have now, and spreading that capital over 2 years. So you're not just pulling from the same pot and kind of almost taking away from yourself because you've only got that one pool. You've got now 2 pools to really kind of mix and choose. That's what you're saying, like this team should do to really jumpstart, I guess, their rebuild, really fan out some of the players on this roster and bring up the overall floor of talent with this group.
Yeah, and if Kayvon Thibodeau is still on the board, maybe you're cool with him and you're taking him at 8. And if that's the case, it'd be like, okay, it's fine. If you wanted to find an upgrade at right tackle and a Charles Cross or an Ike Ekwonu or an Evan Neal or something was still available at 8, okay, like I'd be down with that too. But I think it's realistic to think that probably 5 out of the 6 top 3 pass rushers and top 3 pass rushers and top 3 offensive tackles are going to be off the board by the time number 8 rolls around. So if you're sitting there and you're the Falcons and you don't love any of the edge rushers that are left, and none of the offensive tackles that are left are good enough for you to upgrade over the right side of the offensive line that you currently have, and you're going to say to yourself, okay, like we'll probably pick a receiver here at number 8. Trade back, like 100% trade back. That's a waste of a pick for Atlanta's situation. So obviously, depending on how the board falls, it's not like I'm saying, hey, trade back from 8 no matter what. But I really love to see the Falcons make sure that they are picking up the phone, doing their due diligence, getting creative here, because like we saw with the Philadelphia Eagles, where they had 3 first-round picks this year, and they kind of parlayed that into having 2 first-round picks this year, 2 first-round picks next year, expanding the control over the first round, if you will. I love when teams are able to do that. The Miami Dolphins have been doing that the last couple of years, before this year, of course, without any first-round picks anymore, but they did that in years past, and I loved that part of it. I loved being able to stretch your control. And look, I mean, let's face it, Will, this isn't the best draft class this year. It's not.
Right.
I mean, if you look at last year's draft class, You take the guy who's probably going to go number one overall, Aiden Hutchinson, you put him in last year's draft class. I mean, Aiden probably doesn't go until 12, 13. Like he's probably going outside the top 10, outside the top 12, and the guy's going to go number one overall this year. So you look at this draft class and you go, okay, it's not that strong. And you don't always want to look to next year and think that the grass is always greener, but this sounds really harsh, but like it can't get worse than this class. I mean, football players are just too talented. So
Right.
I know people are like, okay, well, you're just taking a risk on next year too. Yes, but it's not going to get worse than this class. And instead,
teams already have an idea of what next year is going to look like.
And it might be better. That's the thing. It's like, it might be way better. It might be like the year before's class. So, it's just, that's all the things that kind of go through my head when I think about the Falcons situation. Of course, it's always dependent on who's on the board. Every situation like that is. But I think the more simulations that I run, the more I think trading back from 8 could be really smart for Atlanta.
Yeah. And it's you're buying lottery tickets. You don't want to buy all of your lottery tickets in one kind of drawing, right?
Sure.
This is just an opportunity for you to maybe get a couple more tickets next year when you've got a different class, a whole different crop. There may be different skill sets. It may shake out where this could be a deeper draft, but that one is really, really top heavy, and you would love to have 2 first-round picks. So yeah, I mean, this is something that all of these teams are weighing. And of course, when you're talking about number 8, because it is such a coveted top 10 pick in this draft, positional value obviously is a very big talking point, because you don't want to, on the one hand, waste that pick on a position that maybe not a lot of teams are really gunning for. You could get that player a little bit later just because that's not a marquee spot that teams are going to prioritize. But also with the number 8 pick, you just want to get players who are going to make an impact. And maybe your best player at a lesser position is still going to end up being better than the player at a more coveted position who has been bumped up just because that position is so important. So let's take positions just off the board. Who do you think is the most, I guess, talented, or if you want to name a few players, just, pound for pound, the best player, regardless of position, kind of in this first round?
I think when I think of some of the best players in this class at their craft, prime Derek Stingley comes to mind, man. If you can guarantee that he's healthy, I think that he's unbelievable. I'm not so quick to forget the freshman season. The sophomore year wasn't nearly as bad as people talk about. I mean, especially when you look at that LSU program and how it was just basically up in flames behind the scenes. And so I wouldn't be super motivated to play for that program either. That was a sinking ship. Had the injury this year, and I think he's got all the talent in the world, man. I think that he's incredible as long as he's fully healthy. Tyler Linderbaum, the center from Iowa, I think is another player who, when you say pound for pound, I think that he is absolutely a stud. Jordan Davis, you have to put him up there, the defensive tackle from Georgia, just because you and I talked about this when we had you on the podcast. You used the word unicorn, and I mean, it makes sense, man. It's just people shouldn't be built like this. They really should not. So I think that, he's obviously fantastic as well. I think you got to throw Kyle Hamilton up there. Okay, so what? Yep. He didn't test like Derwin James. I think he's still absolutely fantastic as a player. And then, after that, I think there's a lot of players to like. Like, I think there's a lot of good players, but those are a handful that I would say, man, I think you're talking pound for pound. I mean, I might throw Trent McDuffie in there too, now that I'm thinking of it. I absolutely loved watching Trent McDuffie from Washington. I think he's an incredibly smart, instinctual player. I think he had a long, long career in the NFL. So those are a couple of the guys that I would say I'm going to have the highest grades on when my big board's all finalized by draft weekend.
Yeah, it's good to know. A lot of those names, I don't think come as a surprise to people. It's so weird with, the Stingley conversation, because it happened a little bit with AJ Terrell. I feel like when he was coming out, people were so focused on that last performance against Jamar Chase that they kind of gave it too much credit and too much credence, and then forgot that, well, this dude's been starting for a long time for a major program, has been in some big time games. Maybe let's not discount that. And that's the way, Stingley did perform at such an elite level that freshman year, that we shouldn't just toss that out the window. And then because it wasn't otherworldly like he was in year one, that doesn't mean year two was horrible and a sign that his best days are far behind him. So I like all of your picks there. I think with Linderbaum and Davis especially, that's kind of where my head was at with this question, because you hear teams say all the time, we want to build from the trenches, right? We want to dominate in the trenches. And then when it comes to the guys that actually seemingly are in the heart of those trenches, your interior defensive and offensive linemen, those are the guys that seem to slip down draft boards. Why is that?
Well, I just think when, you look at center, and I think people believe that you can get a great center all the time. And I think that the closer you get to the interior of the offensive line, people have a tendency to think you have so much help, right? You have
Yes.
a guy
Yeah.
to your left and your right. And I think it's those players that are often in one-on-one situations that are the ones that are more coveted. Wide receivers that are outside of the boundary, corners that are outside of the boundary, edge rushers that are one-on-one with offensive tackles that are one-on-one with edge rushers.
Right.
It's those players that the individual traits and skill sets and just overall ability have to shine one-on-one consistently. Those are the things that everybody covets because, yeah, I mean, like you said, like defensive tackles, like you're eating space or whatever, you've got a man to your left and your right, and you got two linebackers behind you at all times. You got help everywhere. And not that Jordan Davis or other interior defensive linemen don't have those one-on-one opportunities. We see that all the time. But it's just often for guys of that mold, centers, true nose tackles on the defensive side, they don't have those one-on-one opportunities where all I got to do is beat this one man and boom, I'm into the backfield. I'm making a play on the football. They just don't have as many of those opportunities as some of those other players do. And I think that that's a big reason why you talk about positional value being so important, is because there's often, if they fail, there's a lot of help. Now, I think that improves the floor of a lot of those guys, but I think the strengths of a lot of those guys still shine and don't nearly get as much attention as they deserve. Like Tyler Linderbaum, people are talking about like, okay, he's short and he's got short arms. Okay, throw on the film. I don't know what to tell you. This dude's awesome. This dude's phenomenal. He's one of the best run blockers in the class. He's nimble. He's got great core strength, understands pass blocking and how to take help and how to redirect guys, and understands angles. And he's just one of the smartest offensive linemen there is from a royal line of offensive linemen at Iowa. Like, what more do you want from? Like, oh, he's got short arms. Okay, so
yeah,
like, I don't know,
had
man.
Short arms the whole time.
I just think it's getting a little out of control. And then the Jordan Davis stuff, like I get the snap count things and I get the not being on passing downs, but at the same time, like Georgia's defensive line was also freaking loaded, and they had Jalen Carter and they had Devontae Wyatt and they had all these other guys. And what Jordan Davis was asked to do, he did it at an elite level. And I think that as we saw in the testing, if you get this guy, and look, he shows up at the combine at 340, which is beautiful. If you get this guy close to a playing weight of 335, this is a player that you could play consistently. He's not going to sit there and be gassed all the time. If you were playing him at 355 and 360, then yeah, the dude's going to be gassed all the time. Take 30 pounds off of him, improve the conditioning. You could do all that kinds of stuff. So I'm on a bit of a rant now because these are just good football players. But yeah, that's kind of what I think about with positional value. You don't want to be, even though I say all these things and I'm praising these players, there are times when you can look at positional value and say, this guy's special and he's exactly what we need. We're going to take him anyways. And there are times when that is the right move, but you just don't want to make a habit of picking guys who have less one-on-one single ability positional value, non-premium positions, if you will. So that's my whole approach to it, is that you got to be able to praise the players when they're still good, but you also have to have the right drafting philosophy and realizing how replaceable they are and how much one-on-one opportunity, how much help they have, all that kind of stuff. All that goes into it.
Yeah, it's all about exposure, right? How exposed are you to potentially making a great play for your team or a big negative play?
Right.
If you're a left tackle, you're out there, you're exposed. And if you're an edge rusher and you've got no help, you're not running a stunt or a twist or anything, you got to go win one-on-one, you're exposed. And so, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And a lot of these non-marquee positions, it's your foundation, right? You want to set up your foundation to allow these marquee positions to play to their fullest extent. You want your quarterback to be protected. You want to be able to have that extra time to allow your downfield routes to develop to maximize somebody like Jameson Williams' speed. And so that's where it all complements each other. But I get exactly what you're saying, where if you just have some of these glue guys and no real dynamic players at the spots that really win you games, yeah, then you're just kind of cruising for 7 and 10 seasons, probably left and
Mhm.
right, year in and year out. But let's quickly flip to the most coveted position, the positional value that is ranked number one, and that's quarterback. You touched a little bit on it at the top, so we don't have to go too long on it here. But I'm just curious, of these quarterbacks, because while they may not be, at the top of the first round, it seems like outside of Malik Willis, a little bit again of a pick your fighter type of quarterback class. Is there any one particular player who you feel like would be the best fit for Atlanta's scheme?
I mean, I'd like Desmond Ritter for Arthur Smith's offense. And I think the reason why I would like it is because obviously you'd get hopefully aided by some play action help because Arthur Smith's been a
Mm-hmm.
wizard with that over the last couple of years. And I just think that Desmond Ritter is a smart quarterback at this point. He's probably the most pro ready quarterback in this class. And he's got a big arm and he's got nice size. He's got good mobility. You can do a lot of things with him. And his skill set is reminiscent of Ryan Tannehill. It really is. And I think that you see what he is able to do in Cincinnati's offense, and he goes through reads a lot better than the rest of the quarterbacks in this class. He under his mechanics between all the way from his feet through his shoulders and his throwing motion. I mean, it's very clean. It's very fluid. He navigates a pocket very well. He understands pressure. He doesn't panic and things like that. The accuracy is sometimes a little bit of an issue to me, but I watched a couple of games of Desmond Ritter, I think, during the season. And I was watching them all 22 of them, and I got through like 3 or 4 games, and I'm like, man, there are times when he just misses throws. And I hate that because as a
Yeah.
quarterback who has really clean mechanics already, for you to miss throws, it makes me think that that's a natural touch issue for you, touch on
Mm-hmm.
passes. And if your mechanics are already very clean, I don't have a lot of faith of like where I can improve that. You might just be
Yeah. What
bad
do you
at
fix?
having
Right.
touch, right? But the more I watch Desmond Ritter, and somebody told me this during the draft process, they're like, it's as if he needs to calm down at the beginning of games. And I went
Huh.
back and I watched those games and I watched more games, and I'm like, you're right. A lot of the misses that I see from him are like at the beginning of the games, first quarter stuff. And it's like he just needs to calm down, because once he calms down, even sometimes
Yeah.
coming out of the half, he'll do that again. And when he calms down and he gets into a rhythm, and late third quarter, second quarters, things like that, he puts together some damn good drives and he becomes a really good quarterback. And so I don't know if it's just a calm down kind of a thing with Desmond Ritter, but he is the most pro ready guy. I could see a similar mold of what Arthur Smith was able to do with Ryan Tannehill with Desmond Ritter. And so when it comes to fits for Atlanta, I would say that he's probably the best up there.
Yeah. I mean, there's some similarities there between him and Marcus Mariota a little bit as well. And so, I mean, you could see it. Do you think he'll be there in the second round? Or would this be a candidate where if the Falcons knew they maybe liked Ritter at quarterback, they trade back and get him in that 20 to 23 range?
Yeah, I know you have me on this podcast, so I can answer that question. But the answer is I have no idea. I don't know. I do not know where Desmond Ritter is going to go. I know Malik
Mm-hmm.
Willis is going to be the first quarterback off the board, unless the Carolina Panthers do something crazy and draft Kenny Pickett at 6 while Malik Willis is still there. But basically, barring every other team, I think Willis is going to be the first quarterback off the board. I think Pickett's probably going to be the second quarterback off the board. And then I think Desmond Ritter is going to be the third quarterback. I just don't know where. Like
Yeah.
if Carolina picks Kenny Pickett and if the Steelers pick Malik Willis somehow somewhere in the draft order, I don't know. I don't know where Desmond Ritter goes. Like, does he just go 32 to the Detroit Lions maybe? Or does somebody pop back into the first round trading with Kansas City or Cincinnati at 30 and 31 to make that happen? I think that's probably more realistic, but I really don't know. I don't know where his stock is right now. And it's just, it's so hard to predict this quarterback class outside of
Yeah, it
Malik
really
Willis.
is.
It really is.
Yeah. Is there, I mean, yeah, I'm trying to, it's just like, it is such a pick your fighter class, right? And there is some, no prospect is perfect in this class, obviously, but even the little nuances between guys are different. It's, we'll pick you're not just picking the traits that you like, you're also kind of picking the batch of flaws that come with it. And some guys, like you said, it can be coached up, it's mechanics, it's things like that. Some are just more inherent natural traits that you can't really coach. So what do you want to work with there? But Ritter makes a lot of sense for all of the reasons that you highlighted. I'm curious outside of him though. Let's say the Falcons decide to just kind of pass on quarterback in the first round. They don't think the value's there. Day 2, day 3, probably more day 2, round 2, round 3 guys that you think would be worth betting on their upside.
I mean, basically, Matt Corral's in there, Sam Howell's maybe in there, but outside of them, there's not really. I mean, like Bailey Zappi came from a really fun offense at Western
Yeah,
Kentucky
Western
and Houston
Kentucky.
Baptist, but I mean, I don't think he's a guy that you would super invest in. I think it's really just those top 5 quarterbacks: Malik, Pickett, Desmond Ritter, Sam Howell, Matt Corral, and just however you want to divvy those guys up. I think 3 are probably going to go in the first round. Like I said, I think it's Malik, I think it's Pickett, I think it's Ritter who go in the first round, and then Howell and Corral are going somewhere in this on day 2, but I think you could pull all 32 teams in the league and you might have them split 16 to 16, like where they like who would have one of those guys above the other. So I think that's probably the range which you're looking for these guys, but it's not a strong quarterback at the quarterback class at the top. And it's also not a deep one. So if you're not getting one in the first 2 rounds, which I think that those are probably where those guys are going to go, you're basically punting on them. And you're basically just knowing that you're drafting a backup quarterback at that point.
Do you have any read yet on what the quarterback class will look like next year? Or is it still too far out to tell?
Well, I mean, like you got guys who are potentially going to come out like CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, Tyler Van Dyke from Miami, potentially Spencer Rattler. I don't think Caleb Williams isn't eligible, right? He was a true freshman last year.
Yeah, I think he was a true freshman.
Yeah, I don't think he's eligible, but those are 4 right there. And those are like arm talent quarterbacks, right? I mean, like those Bryce Young just won the Heisman. Like he's incredible.
It's more like what we saw last year.
It's just guys who have bigger arms. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
No, like Willis has a really good arm. Ritter has a decent arm. Corral has a decent arm. Howell's arm is okay. Pickett's arm, I'm worried about. Zappi's arm, I'm worried about. Like, it's just not a strong class. There's just not a lot of elite arms. That's why people are talking about Malik Willis, no matter what, going as QB1 in this class, because people just want to bet on the biggest arm in the class. I think next year you've got some legit live arms that could be coming through. Now, of course, there's a big college football season coming up to see how high they would be regarded when it comes to the NFL draft. But yeah, those are 4 guys off the top of my head, and that's without naming any quarterbacks that could come out of nowhere and have some fun. I mean, we've had, obviously, Burrow the year before, Kyler Murray when he had his big breakout year, Kenny Pickett last year. You look at it happens all the time at this point. So I think that there's also going to be somebody or maybe 2 people to surprise us too.
All right, let's group these last 2 together because I think they're really the positions that are the clearest need. And that's edge rusher and wide receiver. And it's, you and I have talked on both this podcast so far and yours at wide receiver for great length. I think that wide receiver is a very clear need. There are some good players in this draft. It kind of makes sense with where those players will probably start going and where the Falcons are in this first round. That being said, when the season ended and the Falcons were dead last again in sacks by like a huge margin, I sat there and I was like, what are we doing? I felt a little bit like Will Ferrell in Zoolander. Like I'm taking crazy pills because why not? Like this isn't a bad edge rusher group, especially kind of near that front of the first round. It's better than it's been in a couple of years outside of maybe the elite first guy who's going to go off the board first. But the Falcons there's been no smoke around them with edge rusher. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that means they're locked in on edge rusher. But both of those positions, which one do you think will be set up best for if the Falcons are going to stay at 8 and they want to get an impact player at one of those positions? How would you prioritize those for this team? And at what spot do they have a better chance to get a day 1 impact guy, but also maybe a future Pro Bowler at the position?
Well, I'd go edge rusher 100% just because, it's almost just math at that point. I have a theory where you as a team will have the opportunity to sign or draft a top wide receiver every other year. every other year you will have the opportunity. I mean, like, look at
I
how
agree.
wide receiver just shook up in free agency and in
Yep.
trade. And like, we're seeing so many deep, great wide receiver classes come through every year after year after year. You are guaranteed, no matter who you are, no matter where you pick in the draft, you are guaranteed to have an opportunity to sign a high impact wide receiver, either a wide receiver 2 or a wide receiver 1 every other year. So with the 8th overall pick, if you can go up and get yourself a really great edge rusher, like if Jermaine Johnson is still there at 8,
So
I'd take
you like him that high?
I would take Jermaine Johnson over any of the wide receivers if I'm Atlanta. Yes, I would take
Why
Jermaine
is that?
Johnson there. I mean,
What?
I think again, it's kind of goes back to positional scarcity. Like
Mhm.
that's a part that goes into it. I'm playing the math a little bit there, but I also think Jermaine Johnson is just a damn good 4-3 defensive end. Like, I just think he's a really good player. I watched his tape and I thought, okay, what we have here is a really dominant, strong run defender, great hands, good motor, does everything well for you. Maybe will sometimes give you flashes of pass rush, really great push pull, knows how to dominate, get his hands in the right position. Like, I just thought he was a really clean, great base 4-3 defensive end. And then I watched him at the Senior Bowl, and the coaches told him, hey, this is a one-on-one drill. Pin your ears back, beat this dude, get to the quarterback. And he, rep after rep after rep, he dominated so much so that he didn't even practice the third day. So that tells me that this dude is a lot closer to being a really good pass rusher than I originally thought. And I think he's a total package. I think Jermaine Johnson is a top 15 kind of a talent. And if you are asking me to pick between Jermaine Johnson and anyone in this wide receiver class for Atlanta, I'm picking Jermaine Johnson because I know I can get a wide receiver at some point later. Like, when you look at the Falcons 2 second-round picks, like,
Mhm.
you know who you could have there? Maybe a George Pickens, maybe a Sky Moore, maybe a Jahan Dotson, one of those guys. Edge rusher? Who's going to be on the board at that point? I think
Yeah,
Arlen
so
Abikade is probably going to be
keep
off the
following
board.
that line of thought. What does the depth look like with these two groups?
Again, like the depth for wide receiver is a lot deeper than it is for edge rusher. Like, if you were going to tell me that Arnold Ebiketie or
Nick Benito
who's
or
the
somebody like that?
well, I'm not the biggest Nick Benito fan, but who no, I'm absolutely blanking. Who's Boye Mafe? Thank you. I'm an idiot. Boye Mafe, Arnold Ebiketie, Drake Jackson. Like,
Drake
if you could
Jackson, yeah.
guarantee me any of those guys would still be on the board at the beginning of the second round, okay, maybe it's a little bit different of a conversation. But even then, I think Boye Mafe is probably going somewhere in the back end of the first round. We've heard that Arnold Ebiketie could as well. The NFL just doesn't seem to be as high as I am on Drake Jackson, so maybe they're not even considering that. I'd rather have Jermaine Johnson and Sky Moore
I love
than
Sky
I
Moore.
would rather have Garrett Wilson and Majay Sanders or Nick Benito or something like that. That I would rather have it the other way around. And I just think you can get wide receiver basically anywhere, any year. So use your top, more premium picks on edge rusher. Go take that dart throw to the dartboard on edge rusher more than wide receiver. Yes.
I completely agree with that philosophy. 100%. I've been looking almost at receiver the way that we looked at running back probably a decade ago. Kind of just, there was such a supply and demand kind of imbalance. The supply just so far outweighed the demand, and we're not there yet with receiver. And I don't know if we're ever going to get there, just because of the importance of the passing game in the league. But yeah, I mean, you look around, there's receivers everywhere except for here in Atlanta. But yeah, like it's
there
not,
were last
were.
year. There was Kyle Pitts. There was Calvin Ridley. There was Russell Gage. There were.
It took the doomsday scenario for Atlanta to lose all of its wide receivers, which, goes to show just how, which is also kind of why it's dumb when all of the, Bleacher Report or whatever will be like, take a look at the Bengals wide receiver skill group. And it's like eyes emoji and all these former first round picks. It's just kind of like, yeah, but what team couldn't make its version of that graphic? But yeah, I think I did a mock draft and I took, it was right after our conversation. I took Jordan Davis and I was just having real buyer's remorse, which is dumb because I got all into that positional value thing as well. And I was like, Jordan Davis at 8, am I an idiot? And no, I don't think I am. But I did Drake London kind of just to go with an opposites thing. And I worked myself into a corner because, to your point, when you get to that second round, even though they've got 2 second round picks, the impact just is not there. And so it's like, sure, I'm going to get maybe a year one rotational rusher who could get me 6 sacks. That's not what the Falcons need. Falcons need a guy who can come in here, be the guy, let everybody play off of him. And you've got me having to go look back at some Jermaine Johnson tape because you sold the hell out of him, man.
Right. And I think that you just gotta, like, shoot, I'm even thinking in my head here, like, if you drafted Jordan Davis at 8, and then if one of those edge rushers happen to be there, you're drafting one of Boye Mafe, Arnold Ebiketie, or Drake Jackson, then you can still, I think, in the second round, maybe you double up on wide receiver. Pick John Mechie, you pick Alec Pierce. Then all of a sudden your haul is you've got a unicorn of a defensive
Yeah.
tackle. You've got a good speed athletic edge rusher, and then you got your 2 wide receivers to start building things out. You know that, okay, you've got maybe your wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 on the roster. Next year, you're going to go draft your wide receiver 1, and then all of a sudden you have all the guys that you want. It's a multi-year rebuild for the Falcons anyways, and I think they have to have that approach. Just because wide receiver is by far just a glaring need for them does not mean you have to take it with your first pick. You've still got to attack these things with the premium position order that you would want to. And I think that edge rusher would be a much better investment at 8 than a wide receiver would be.
Well, from your mouth to Terry Fontenot's ears. But this has been awesome, dude. I mean, multi-year rebuild, it makes perfect sense. I think you did a really good job of illustrating where the strengths and weaknesses are for this team in particular. So I can't thank you enough, Trevor, for hopping on and joining me.
Appreciate it, Will. Anytime, man.
You got anything to let our listeners know about before I let you get out of here?
All my shenanigans on Twitter at Tampa Bay Trey, all my article content over at PFF.com, and then all of my NFL draft thoughts 3 days a week over at the NFL Stock Exchange podcast.
All right. Thank you so much, man. Yeah, you got a little bit of a grind here until the end of the month, but hopefully after that, you'll be able to get some rest.
I'm excited, man. It's the best time of the year, no doubt.